The Krenim laughed at our pathetic bodies until they realized we live on Earth. Their mockery echoed through the United Nations headquarters in New York City as Ambassador Hector, towering and imposing, sneered at the assembled human diplomats. It was 2045, and humanity's first contact with an advanced alien race was not going as hoped. Keith Ward, the lead human diplomat, stood his ground as Hector's piercing gaze swept over him. The alien's 6 limbs rippled with barely contained strength, each movement a reminder of the vast gulf between their species. Hector's voice boomed through the chamber, a mix of derision and pity. Humans, your frail forms and limited abilities are an affront to galactic standards. We Krenim have evolved beyond such weaknesses. Observe. Without warning, Hector launched into a series of physical feats that left the human audience gasping. He leapt impossible heights, bent metal bars with ease, and moved faster than the eye could track. Keith, compelled to participate in this impromptu demonstration, found himself struggling to keep up. His best efforts appeared laughable next to the Krenim's casual displays of superiority. As Keith caught his breath, sweat beading on his brow, Hector delivered a chilling proclamation. Earth is ripe for colonization. Your species, clearly inferior, cannot hope to resist. Submit now, and we may find use for you as servants. The chamber erupted in chaos. World leaders argued via secure channels, military advisors called for immediate action, and the weight of humanity's future pressed down on Keith's shoulders. In that moment of crisis, an idea formed. Desperate, perhaps foolish, but their only hope. 5 trials across our planet's harshest terrains, the Sahara Desert, Mount Everest, the Amazon rainforest, Antarctica, and the Mariana Trench. If we humans prove our worth, Earth remains free. If your Krenim team prevails, we'll submit to your rule. A tense silence fell over the chamber. Hector's multiple eyes narrowed, calculating. Then a smile spread across his alien features. Agreed. Your primitive planet poses no threat to Krenim superiority. We accept your challenge. As Hector and his contingent departed to establish a lunar base for acclimatization, Earth erupted into a frenzy of preparation. Keith assembled a team of elite human experts, survivalists, athletes, and Earth scientists, each bringing crucial skills to the monumental task ahead. Global media coverage was relentless. Humanity united in a mix of fear, excitement, and fierce determination. Isolated incidents of violence against the few Krenim visitors threatened to derail the competition, forcing Keith to navigate treacherous diplomatic waters while training for the trials of his life. With only a month until the first challenge in the Sahara Desert, Keith pushed himself to the limit. His team developed specialized equipment and strategies tailored to Earth's unforgiving environments, while the Krenim relied on their advanced technology and natural abilities. As the fateful day approached, Keith stood at the edge of the vast desert, the scorching sun beating down on him. The fate of Earth rested on his shoulders and those of his team. In the distance, Hector and his Krenim warriors gathered, their alien forms a stark reminder of the challenge ahead. The future of humanity hung in the balance as Keith took his first step into the burning sands. The greatest test in Earth's history was about to begin, and failure was not an option. Keith's heart pounded as he took his first steps into the Sahara's burning sands. The sun blazed overhead, its intensity unlike anything he'd experienced before. Sarah Johnson and Marco Rodriguez flanked him, their faces set with unwavering drive. A shimmer in the air caught Keith's attention. In an instant, Ambassador Hector and his 2 Krenim companions materialized several meters away, their alien forms casting strange shadows on the dunes. "Ah, the primitives arrive," Hector's voice boomed across the barren landscape. "Shall we begin this futile exercise?" Keith squared his shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "We're ready." A holographic display flickered to life between the 2 groups, outlining their 300-kilometer route and the locations of the artifacts they needed to collect. Without warning, it vanished, and a piercing tone signaled the start of the race. The Krenim exploded into action, their 6-limbed bodies propelling them across the sand at incredible speeds. Keith and his team broke into a run, but within minutes the aliens were nothing more than specks on the horizon. Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the terrain. "We don't have to, not yet. Let's focus on conserving our energy and resources." As the day wore on, the heat became oppressive. Keith felt as if he were breathing fire, each inhalation scorching his lungs. They trudged on, their progress painfully slow compared to the Krenim's initial burst of speed. Night fell, bringing with it a bone-deep chill that made Keith long for the day's heat. As they huddled around a small solar-powered heater, Sarah spoke up. "We should travel at night," she said, her voice hoarse from the dry air. "The Krenim won't expect it, and we'll avoid the worst of the heat." Keith considered this. "It's risky, our visibility will be limited." "I can navigate by the stars," Sarah assured him, "and we have our night vision gear." They set out under the cover of darkness, their pace quickening as the cool air reinvigorated their tired bodies. By dawn they had covered significant ground, and Keith allowed himself a glimmer of hope. That hope was nearly extinguished when the sandstorm hit on the second day. The wind howled, whipping grains of sand against their protective gear with brutal force. Keith could barely see his hand in front of his face. "We need shelter," Sarah shouted over the roar of the storm. She led them to the lee side of a large dune, where they hastily erected their tent, reinforcing it against the wind's onslaught. As they huddled inside, Keith's mind raced. Were the Krenim facing the same challenge, or had they somehow bypassed this elemental fury? His question was answered hours later, when the storm finally abated. As they emerged from their shelter, they spotted 3 figures in the distance, stumbling and disoriented. The Krenim's sleek protective suits were caked with sand, their advanced sensors blinking erratically. Hector was half carrying one of his companions, while the other moved in aimless circles. Keith felt a twinge of satisfaction. Earth's wild unpredictability had leveled the playing field. The race continued, with both teams now pushing their bodies to the limit. The humans' carefully rationed water supply proved crucial as they witnessed the Krenim struggling with dehydration, their alien physiology ill-equipped for the constant need to replenish fluids. On the 4th day, as the sun reached its zenith, Keith spotted a prone form ahead. It was Zorn, one of the Krenim, collapsed on the sand. Hector and Vex hovered nearby, their alien features contorted with what Keith assumed was concern. Keith shook his head. "If we leave them, we're no better than they think we are. Besides, we might need their help later." They approached cautiously. Hector's multiple eyes narrowed as he saw them. "Come to gloat, human." Keith held out his canteen. "We came to help. Your friend needs water." Surprise flickered across Hector's alien features. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the canteen, helping Zorn drink. The moment of cooperation was short-lived. As soon as Zorn recovered enough to stand, both teams were off again, the competition resuming its frantic pace. The final day brought a new challenge. As they neared the oasis that marked the finish line, a group of figures emerged from behind a dune, brandishing weapons. "Bandits!" Sarah hissed, reaching for the small laser pistol they'd been allowed for emergencies. The attackers fell upon both teams with surprising speed. Keith found himself back-to-back with Hector, fending off a bandit wielding a wicked-looking blade. "Your planet is full of surprises," Hector grunted as he used his superior strength to disarm an attacker. Keith managed a grim smile as he dodged a wild swing. "You have no idea." Working together, humans and Krenim drove off the bandits. As the dust settled, Keith realized the experience had forged an unexpected bond between the two teams. The oasis appeared on the horizon, a shimmer of green in the endless sea of sand. Both teams broke into a final sprint, their earlier cooperation forgotten in the rush for victory. Keith's lungs burned, his legs screamed in protest, but he pushed on. He could see Hector just ahead, the alien's multiple limbs pumping furiously. With a final burst of speed, Keith surged forward. His foot crossed the designated finish line mere seconds before Hector's. Hector approached, his alien features unreadable. "It seems," he said slowly, "that we may have underestimated you, human." Keith nodded, too exhausted for words. As he looked at his team, battered but triumphant, he knew this was only the beginning. The Everest challenge loomed ahead, a test that would push them in entirely different ways. But for now they had proven that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the Krenim. It was a small victory, but a crucial one. As Keith closed his eyes, letting the cool oasis breeze wash over him, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before his mind turned to the monumental task that still lay ahead. Keith's muscles ached as he stepped off the plane in Kathmandu. The victory in the Sahara still lingered in his mind, but he knew they couldn't afford to dwell on past successes. Mount Everest loomed before them, a challenge unlike any they had faced before. Emma Chen greeted him at the airport, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "Ready for some real climbing?" she asked, hefting her gear bag. Dr. Alex Thompson joined them, his medical kit slung over his shoulder. "Let's hope my services won't be needed too much," he said. But the grim set of his jaw betrayed his concerns about the dangers ahead. The team spent several days in Kathmandu, acclimating to the altitude and finalizing their preparations. Keith couldn't help but notice the Krenim's absence from the usual tourist spots. They were likely preparing in their own way, hidden from prying eyes. As they made their way to Everest Base Camp, the magnitude of the challenge truly set in. The mountain dominated the horizon, its peak shrouded in clouds and mystery. Keith's heart raced, a mix of anticipation and fear coursing through him. At base camp, they finally encountered the Krenim team. Hector stood tall, his alien frame somehow more imposing in the thin mountain air. Beside him, Zorn looked fully recovered from his ordeal in the desert. The new addition to their team, Nara, regarded the humans with open curiosity. "I trust you're prepared for real adversity this time," Hector said, his voice carrying a hint of challenge. As dawn broke the next day, both teams began their ascent. The Krenim surged ahead, their powerful limbs propelling them up the lower slopes with ease. Keith's team maintained a steadier pace, Emma leading them along well-chosen routes. "Don't let their speed worry you," Emma called back. "Slow and steady wins this race." As they pushed higher, the effects of altitude became more pronounced. Keith's breaths came in ragged gasps, each step a monumental effort. He glanced up, surprised to see the Krenim team's progress had slowed considerably. Emma noticed too. "They're struggling with the thin air," she observed. "Their physiology isn't adapted for this." Indeed, the Krenim's movements had become labored. Their advanced technology, which had given them such an advantage in the desert, seemed to be malfunctioning in the extreme cold. As they approached the death zone above 8,000 meters, a vicious storm descended upon the mountain. Howling winds and driving snow reduced visibility to near zero. Keith and his team, following Emma's lead, quickly set up their high-altitude tent, huddling inside as the storm raged. Keith peered out into the whiteout conditions, conflicting emotions warring within him. They had a chance to pull ahead, but at what cost? As they resumed their climb, they encountered the Krenim team. Nara had collapsed, her alien features contorted in pain. Hector and Zorn hovered over her, their usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "Cerebral edema," Dr. Thompson diagnosed after a quick examination. "She needs to descend immediately." Hector's multiple eyes blinked rapidly. "We have an emergency teleportation device," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "But using it would disqualify us." Keith met Hector's gaze. "Your teammate's life is more important than this challenge." After a moment's hesitation, Hector nodded. In a flash of light, the Krenim team vanished, leaving Keith and his companions alone on the mountain's unforgiving slopes. They pushed on, each step a battle against exhaustion and thinning air. Alex began to cough, a wet, worrying sound. "Pulmonary edema," he wheezed, reaching for his medical kit. "I can treat it, but we need to be careful." Emma took point, her years of experience evident in every calculated step and precise rope placement. Keith marveled at her skill as she navigated precarious ice fields and sheer rock faces. The summit ridge stretched before them, a knife edge of snow and rock between them and their goal. Emma led the way, her movements slow but sure. Keith followed, every fiber of his being focused on the next step, the next handhold. and then suddenly there was nowhere higher to climb. They stood on the summit of Everest. The world sprawled beneath them. Keith planted the Earth flag with trembling hands, then added a symbol of unity, a reminder of the unexpected cooperation that had emerged during their trials. As they began their descent, the magnitude of their achievement washed over Keith. They had conquered Everest. They had defeated the Krenim. But most importantly, they had proven that human adaptability and teamwork could overcome even the most daunting challenges. The global response to their victory was overwhelming. As they recovered in Kathmandu, news poured in of celebrations erupting worldwide. The Krenim, faced with 2 consecutive defeats, seemed to be re-evaluating their stance on human capabilities. Hector requested a meeting, his demeanor markedly different from their first encounter. "We may have misjudged your species," he admitted. "Perhaps there is more to learn from each other than we initially believed." As Keith prepared for the next challenge in the Amazon rainforest, he knew the road ahead would be difficult. The Krenim would not underestimate them again, and the unique dangers of the jungle presented an entirely new set of obstacles. But as he looked at his team, Emma's quiet confidence, Alex's unwavering dedication, Keith felt a surge of pride. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, carrying the spirit of Everest with them into the unknown depths of the Amazon. The dense, humid air of the Amazon enveloped Keith as he stepped off the small plane onto the makeshift landing strip. The stark contrast to the icy slopes of Everest was jarring, but he welcomed the change. Their victory on the world's highest peak still felt surreal, but there was no time to bask in past glories. Maria Rodriguez approached, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Welcome to Green Hell," she said with a wry smile. "Hope you're ready for some real jungle action." Jack Harper, their new survivalist expert, was already surveying the tree line with keen eyes. "We've got our work cut out for us," he muttered, adjusting the straps on his pack. Keith nodded, taking in his new team. Emma and Alex had returned home, their specific skills less suited to this environment. He missed their familiar presence, but knew Maria and Jack's expertise would be crucial here. The Krenim emerged from their own transport, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the oppressive heat. Hector's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the bright sunlight filtering through the canopy. Zorn seemed to be having trouble breathing in the thick air. The new addition to their team, Lyra, was already examining the local flora with obvious fascination. A stern-looking official approached both teams. "The rules are simple," he announced. 3 artifacts are hidden in the jungle. First team to retrieve all 3 wins. You have 5 days. Any questions?" "Don't worry," Maria said, noticing his expression. "They may have fancy toys, but they don't know this jungle like I do." Jack nodded in agreement. "And all the tech in the universe won't help if you can't adapt when things go wrong." "Electrical storm," Maria warned. "We need to find shelter fast." They quickly rigged up a makeshift canopy, using tarps and vines, huddling underneath as the sky opened up. Lightning crackled overhead, the sound of rain on leaves nearly deafening. Through the sheets of water, Keith caught a glimpse of the Krenim team. Their sensors were sparking and sputtering, clearly malfunctioning in the intense electromagnetic disturbance. Hector's frustrated shouts were barely audible over the storm. When the deluge finally subsided, Keith's team emerged relatively unscathed. Jack had used the opportunity to collect rainwater, refilling their canteens. Maria was already oriented, pointing them in the direction of the first artifact. They pressed on through the soggy underbrush, the air even thicker now with humidity. Strange calls echoed through the trees, birds, monkeys, and creatures Keith couldn't even begin to identify. As they approached a wide, fast-moving river, Keith spotted the Krenim team on the opposite bank. The aliens were attempting to use their superior strength to ford the rapids, but the current was too strong. He watched as Zorn was swept downstream, Hector barely managing to haul him back to shore. "They're going about it all wrong," Jack said, shaking his head. He pointed to a cluster of fallen trees upstream. "We can use those to make a bridge. It'll take some work, but it's safer than trying to fight that current." Keith nodded, and they set to work. It was grueling labor in the oppressive heat, but soon they had a sturdy if precarious bridge spanning the river. Maria crossed first, her steps light and sure. On the other side, she let out a whoop of triumph. As they made their way deeper into the jungle, the foliage grew even thicker. Strange plants with enormous leaves blocked out much of the sunlight, creating a twilight world of shifting shadows. A group of people emerged from the undergrowth, their skin painted with intricate designs, spears held at the ready. Keith's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. Maria stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. She spoke in a language Keith didn't recognize, her voice low and respectful. The tribespeople responded, their tone cautious but not openly hostile. After several tense minutes of back and forth, Maria turned to Keith with a smile. "They're going to help us," she said. "They know where the second artifact is hidden." As they followed their new guides through the jungle, Keith caught sight of the Krenim team in the distance. Hector was attempting to communicate with another group of tribespeople, but his alien mannerisms seemed to be causing more confusion than understanding. The indigenous guides led them to an ancient stone structure, half reclaimed by the jungle. Vines snaked through crumbling walls, and the damp smell of decay hung in the air. "Be careful," Maria warned as they entered. "This place is old, and there may be traps." They moved cautiously through dim corridors, Jack's expert eye spotting and disarming several ingenious snares. In a central chamber, bathed in a shaft of sunlight from a hole in the ceiling, they found the second artifact, a small, gleaming metal disc covered in strange symbols. "Parasites," Jack replied grimly. "Nasty ones. We need to be careful. They can burrow into your skin." They took precautions, applying a foul-smelling paste Maria concocted from local plants. It wasn't pleasant, but it kept the parasites at bay. The same couldn't be said for the Krenim. As night fell and both teams set up camp, Keith could hear the aliens' distressed noises. Their unfamiliarity with Earth's microscopic threats was proving to be a significant disadvantage. Darkness brought new challenges. The jungle came alive with sounds, the screech of night birds, the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the underbrush. The canopy blocked out the stars, making navigation difficult. Jack, however, seemed perfectly at ease. He led them confidently through the darkness, using subtle cues Keith could barely perceive, the feel of the breeze, the slope of the ground, the scent of certain plants. As dawn broke, they found themselves at the mouth of a vast cave system. The final artifact was close, they could feel it. But as they approached, shouts and the sound of machinery reached their ears. A group of men with chainsaws and heavy equipment were clearing a section of forest near the cave entrance. Endangered animals fled from the destruction, their cries of distress echoing through the trees. The Krenim team arrived just as Keith was assessing the situation. Hector's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Without warning, the alien strode towards the loggers, his posture aggressive. "Stop this at once," Hector demanded, his translator struggling to convey the proper tone. The loggers, startled by the alien's appearance, reacted with fear and anger. One of them revved his chainsaw threateningly. Keith knew he had to act fast before the situation spiraled out of control. He stepped forward, hands raised. "Wait," he called out in Portuguese, thanking his lucky stars for the crash course Maria had given him. "We're not here to fight, we just want to talk." It took nearly an hour of tense negotiation, with Maria's expertise proving invaluable. In the end, they reached an agreement. The loggers would cease their operations in this area in exchange for information on more sustainable logging practices and help in securing legal permits for less ecologically sensitive regions. As the loggers packed up their equipment, a local conservation officer arrived, alerted by the commotion. He led Keith's team to a hidden chamber within the cave system, the location of the final artifact. With all three objects in their possession, Keith's team emerged victorious once again. The Krenim, battered by parasites and clearly frustrated, could only watch as the humans celebrated their win. Later, as they prepared to leave the jungle behind, Hector approached Keith. The alien's demeanor had changed, his usual arrogance replaced by something closer to respect. "Your species continues to surprise us," Hector said, Perhaps we have much to learn from each other. Keith nodded, thinking of the challenges still to come. Antarctica awaited, a frozen wasteland that would test them in entirely new ways. But for now they had proven once again that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or physical prowess, but in their ability to adapt, to understand, and to work together in the face of adversity. As they boarded the plane that would take them back to civilization, Keith couldn't help but wonder what the next challenge would bring. The fate of Earth still hung in the balance, but with each victory, hope grew stronger. Whatever the frozen continent had in store for them, Keith knew his team would face it head-on, carrying the spirit of the Amazon with them into the unknown. The Antarctic wind howled across the desolate landscape as Keith stepped off the transport plane onto the icy tarmac of McMurdo Station. The biting cold instantly penetrated his thermal gear, a stark reminder of the challenge that lay ahead. Commander Samuel Johnson, known to everyone as Frost, was already surveying the vast white expanse beyond the station. "We've got our work cut out for us," he muttered, adjusting his goggles. Keith nodded, taking in his new team. The familiar faces of his past challenges were gone, but he knew Olivia and Frost's expertise would be crucial here. The Krenim emerged from their own transport, their environmental suits gleaming with alien technology. Ector's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the harsh glare of sunlight on snow. Zorn seemed more at ease in the cold than he had been in the Amazon's heat. The new addition to their team, Keller, was already taking readings of the ice beneath their feet. Keith glanced at Ector, seeing the perseverance in the alien's stance. No questions were necessary. The challenge was clear. As they set off across the vast ice sheet, the Krenim quickly pulled ahead, their modified environmental suits allowing them to glide effortlessly over the snow. Keith felt a twinge of concern but pushed it aside. This was their turf now. "Don't worry," Frost said, noticing his expression. "They may have fancy suits, but they don't know this ice like we do." Olivia nodded in agreement, and all the tech in the universe won't help if you can't read the terrain. As if on cue, a low rumble echoed across the ice. Keith looked ahead to see the Krenim team had stopped abruptly at the edge of a vast field of snow-covered crevasses. "Dangerous territory," Frost warned. "We need to navigate carefully." They watched as the Krenim, overconfident in their technology, attempted to cross the field quickly. Suddenly a cry rang out. Kayla had disappeared from view, swallowed by a hidden crevasse. Keith's team sprang into action. Frost quickly organized them into a rope team, while Olivia used ground-penetrating radar to map a safe route. They made steady progress across the treacherous terrain, the sound of the Krenim's frantic rescue efforts fading behind them. As they emerged from the crevasse field, the wind began to pick up. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon with alarming speed. "Katabatic storm," Olivia warned. "We need to find shelter fast." They quickly erected a fortified snow shelter, using techniques perfected by Antarctic explorers over decades. Huddled inside, they listened to the storm rage outside, the wind howling like a furious beast. Through a small viewing port, Keith caught a glimpse of the Krenim team. Their advanced weather prediction technology had failed to accurately forecast the storm's intensity, leaving them exposed and struggling against the elements. When the storm finally subsided, Keith's team emerged relatively unscathed. Frost had used the time to plan their route, while Olivia had identified a network of ice caves that could provide shelter and allow them to make progress even in harsh conditions. They pressed on through the endless white, the air growing colder with each step. Strange sounds echoed across the ice, the creaking of glaciers, the distant thunder of calving icebergs, and the eerie whistle of wind through ice formations. As they approached the halfway point, Olivia spotted something in the distance. "Look there," she said, pointing to a shimmering distortion on the horizon. "A mirage." Keith stared in wonder at the illusory oasis floating above the ice. It was a stark reminder of how alien and treacherous this environment could be, even to those who called Earth home. The darkness of Antarctic winter began to descend, plunging the landscape into an otherworldly twilight. Keith could see the distant lights of the Krenim team, their visual enhancement technology clearly malfunctioning in the extreme cold. Frost led them confidently through the gloom, relying on years of experience and specialized equipment designed for polar night operations. "Stay close," he warned. "It's easy to get disoriented in these conditions." As they neared the South Pole, the terrain became increasingly challenging. Massive pressure ridges of ice rose before them like frozen waves, while wind-carved sastrugi created a treacherous, ever-changing landscape. Finally, after days of grueling travel, they crested a rise to see the South Pole station in the distance. Both teams had arrived almost simultaneously, their final race to the meteorite about to begin. Olivia quickly identified the most likely location of the buried meteorite based on ice flow patterns and geological markers. As they set up their drilling equipment, Keith could see the Krenim struggling with their own high-powered technology, critical components failing in the extreme cold. The human team made steady progress, using a combination of traditional ice-coring techniques and cutting-edge technology designed specifically for Antarctic conditions. The whine of the drill filled the air as they bored deeper and deeper into the ancient ice. Suddenly, both teams broke through to a cavernous space beneath the ice. In the center, embedded in a matrix of frozen rock and metal, lay the meteorite they sought. As they raced to claim the prize, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. Keith's instincts, honed by countless challenges, screamed danger. "Everyone out!" he shouted, grabbing the meteorite and motioning for both teams to retreat. They scrambled back to the surface just as the ice floor of the chamber collapsed, leaving a gaping hole where they had stood moments before. In the stillness that followed, Hector approached Keith. The alien's demeanor had changed, his usual confidence replaced by something closer to respect. "Your species has proven itself beyond our wildest expectations," Hector said. Perhaps it is time for a new approach." Keith nodded, sensing a shift in the air that went beyond the howling Antarctic wind. As both teams prepared to return to McMurdo Station, he couldn't help but wonder what this unexpected turn of events might mean for the future of humanity and their place in the cosmos. The fate of Earth still hung in the balance, but for the first time since the Krenim arrived, Keith felt a glimmer of hope that transcended mere survival. Whatever came next, he knew that humanity had proven itself not just to the Krenim, but to themselves as well. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.